victory and the agony of defeat.
Madison, great ball around the corner, Petticini, he beats them all! Junior Polar out wide, bumped away from Cronulla Sharks coming through, none of them can hold this!
Hello and welcome back to the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Joining me to break down a surprisingly bump week, I suppose, of football is my good mate Sixties, because we've lost the NRL this week. They're on their bye, but we've gained 2 games in the NRLW and the Harvey Women's Premiership. So, as I joked with you, mate, we've taken 1 step backwards but 2 steps forwards in an odd use of that idiom there. But yeah, a lot of football to talk about, mate. I've got the ladies taking on the Sharks, the fellas taking on the Roosters. So we got a couple of big matches against some of the, I suppose, the more uppity teams in the NRL, right? The more, what's the...
uppity?
Uppity, yeah. The yuppie teams of the NRL and the NRLW.
The latte set.
The latte sippers, yes. How you doing, mate? Because we are recording a little bit ahead of our usual schedule because of the hectic week that it lies ahead of us.
Yes, with tomorrow's game being Thursday, where we made this decision as usual on short notice. Is the old text message, you ready to go in 30 minutes, mate? So here we are, early Wednesday morning, recording this before both of us launch into our day. And also shout out to Chris Ricketts. Chris has just moved from Europe to America. It's the time difference has made it really challenging in terms of the Tuesday night live news to get Chris on there. And as people have come to appreciate, he's a great addition to our live podcasts, our commentary in general, his writing. He's we couldn't be happier with how Chris contributes to the Cumberland Throw. But what we're working on is trying to get him onto the preview podcast that we record during the day, because that might be a little bit more time friendly. So we're aiming for next week's preview to get Chris on there. So stand by for that, everyone that's a big fan of Chris. So also, let's do the usual shout outs and reminders. No matter what platform you're watching or listening to this on, if you give a like and subscribe, especially those watching on YouTube, we're trying to get those subscriptions up there towards 1,000 subscribers. It starts to kick a few things into gear in terms of getting our content out there. Shout out to our sponsors, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta for their OG and ongoing support of the Cumberland Throw. And of course to our now long-term sponsors as well, Parramatta Leagues Club, the home of the Eels, where we are always found in Stirlows on match days, but we're also going to be found there for that special away game Cumberland Throw watch party, 25th of July, round 21 against the Broncos. We start at 7 o'clock in Stirlows. The game's on the big screen at 8, but we'll have free finger food. We will have a $5 beer of the month on tap in there. Maybe a few little giveaways, and of course, just a great chance for Eels supporters to get together. Some of the people that we know, some people we don't know that have wanted to catch up and chew the fat over all things para and footy and what have you. Get in there on that day. You don't need to RSVP. We do appreciate if people let us know, because that just helps with working out food and all that sort of stuff. But it's free entry, so we'll see you there on the 25th of July. Apart from that, I think the only other thing just to take care of is just to give a plug to our Patreon. People are pretty keen to support us in whatever way they can. They ask us, how can they do that? Well, Patreon's the easiest thing. It's just a simple $5 a month, and it just helps us to keep that content out there. And we do get asked a lot of things, a lot of questions about merch. That's something that we are working on. And of course, There's John's mug that I've yet to deliver to him. I'm not using it, John, so you don't have to worry about that. Mine's in the wash at the moment. I'm just using the old bottle of water today. But that was a special gift from our good mate Rob. And we might have a few of those that we can bring along on the 25th in at Sterlo's. So just looking at getting that done before that date. So, John, I think that just takes care of a bit of housekeeping. So let's launch into it. Now, unfortunately, there's not too much we can say about the Jersey Flegg at this stage.
Yeah, Wednesday morning, and we're still waiting for a team list. Unfortunately, the only club to not have announced the team list. And while I would usually chastise the club 60s about being tardy here, I believe there are some factors at play as to why they might be struggling to get a team together this week.
Yes. Yeah, there are suspensions. There are injuries, numerous injuries. There have been players called up to New South Wales Cup. It's been a horror run for the Jersey Flegg at the moment, and I think Jordan Rankin is absolutely struggling to put together a team at the moment. As a consequence, there's probably not too much that we can talk about with this game, because if you don't have a team list, you can't really do a preview as such.
There are generalisations about how the team's been playing that we can talk about, but the other thing to bear in mind too is that this game is scheduled to take place at 1:00 p.m. Wentworth Park on Sunday. But as well, in our live stream last night with the news podcast, Chris, one of our regulars there, who also helps with the stuff at Kellyville with the announcements and whatnot on game day, mentioned that there's set to be a rescheduling of these games. So we're not sure where and when they could be or moved to and rescheduled to. So that's something to keep an eye on. But yeah, no team list makes it very difficult to talk about, Craig. The big one here for mine is the errors, obviously. And just regardless of who gets onto the field this week, because there could be some crazy changes this week, but you just need to see the boys tighten up a little bit, don't you? Just tidy up some of the loose play. It's not even really about the defensive lapses. Obviously, they gave away 60 points on the weekend, so yeah, defense is an issue in the short term. But in the losses against the Warriors and the Knights, they still managed to restrict their opponents to 20-ish points. So it's not like the defense was terrible prior to that. But yeah, it was the errors. And that's going to be the big focus, regardless of who's been named, is to get those completion rates back up above 70, 80%, and then put yourselves in the box seat to drive your opposition off the park.
John, one of the big things about last week was in the extended squad, there was something like 10 SG ball players that were named. I think there were 8 or 9 that ended up taking the field, just off the top of my head. So you're talking about around half the team there were SG ball players. What I'm going to be looking for is any of the more experienced Jersey Flegg players to lead the way this week, because I'm not sure that they got that aspect done last week.
Oh, no.
The scoreline says that if you picked up an SG ball team and transplanted them into a Jersey Flegg competition, they're going to struggle, because there is an experience difference, there's a size and maturity difference, and I thought that was perhaps the thing that stood out to me last week, was that you had one team that was running downhill and you had a relatively inexperienced team, albeit we can talk about the talent all you want, but in terms of experience against older players, they couldn't find a way to turn that around, and they needed some of the more experienced players to help guide them, to maybe provide something to lift them, and it just didn't happen. So that's, I think, what Jordan Rankin has to somehow get from his team this week, from those that he selects that are a little bit older, just that leadership out there on the field and finding a way to galvanise a group of youngsters there. And without that happening, it'll be a tough ask for them this week,
Oh, yeah.
because we just don't know how many of those types of players he will be able to put onto the field this week, because the injuries that have been happening, and we know that there was a couple of suspensions out of last week. I think Bamblett
for the high shot at the end of the game that he got sent off for, and was it a high shot or a crusher for Josiah?
It was, yeah. Look, I'm not sure. So Bamblett was, I think, careless. I got sent a thing on the grading, a careless high tackle 2, category 2, which with an early guilty plea, I think might be a week. If he's got no priors.
Yeah.
So if he does have, and we don't know, but we assume he doesn't, then it'd be 2 weeks if he had priors. So early guilty plea, no priors, a week. Josiah, we think he's at least a week with a suspension there, although not entirely sure on that. But then you've got a host of players that are out injured. We saw the week before 3 players leave the field with what looked to be reasonably significant injuries. And that was on top of a number of players who were already out. The Destratus twins, Max Popo hasn't been able to take the field since the SG ball has ended, but I don't know how much of that is an injury and how much whether that happened at training, and that's the reason why he hasn't been able to get, because maybe it was a case of he was timed to come in partway through this and now he's got an injury. I'm not sure, but there's a whole lot of players that aren't available. I guess we wait till the team is announced, and then
that's probably
even when the team's been announced every week, they've
subject to change on game day.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I think we'll leave that one there, John, and we'll go to the New South Wales Cup.
Yeah, sticking with the fellas who also take on the Sydney Roosters. Again, this one was scheduled initially for Sunday out at Wentworth Park, but our good mate Chris has informed us in the live stream yesterday that this one is likely to be moved because I believe there's an RMC game with Glebe being pushed into this slot. So we'll have to stay abreast of the situation there and see if we can find out an update. We haven't got an update today, but if we do, we'll put it into the post. But yeah, the Eels taking on the Roosters in this one, 3v6. It's been a real gauntlet for Parramatta, hasn't it, 60s? They've taken on the top 2 teams, resurgent Newcastle, and now the top 6 Roosters. So at their darkest point, at their lowest point, they've got the toughest run and they're doing really well. And they look like this. Arpa Twaddles at fullback, Liam Scolari and Samuel Louise are on the wings, Araz Namva and Bowie Simonsson back from injury in the centres. Big boost there as he looks to get his position back in first grade, starting with a hit out here in New South Wales Cup. In the halves, we've got Matty Hunter and Ronald Volkman, who have become quite a formidable duo together. So good to see them really kicking on. You got another returnee here in Sam Tuivaiti. How good to see the big man back in the front row. Another player that's going to be looking to get back into first grade ASAP with that game against Penrith looming. He's joined in the front row, though, by Brendan Hands and Tony Mattielli. Tyrese Lakini, another young gun on the edges there, having a good year, is opposite of Charlie Geimer. Dan Keel, captain of the team from lock forward, 60s. Then on the interchange, Will Latu, Urumu Greg, Saxon Pryke, and Kane Kalache. Taking on the Tricolours, just looking through his team, because I feel like they've played the Roosters a lot recently. Just one of those quirks of the draw, and also the fact that the SG Ball finished off a game against the Roosters. They did lose. So they've got one Rodwell in there in Toby, who was obviously the talented half that helped the Roosters win the SG Ball grand final. But they've lost the other Rodwell, who's making his NRL debut, I believe. Ben Johnson's in the centres. That was a good joke last night. Chad Townsend in the halves. And then, yeah, it looks like there's Jackson Allen from the SG Ball, another very talented player there at dummy half on the interchange. But yeah, it looks like they've called on a lot of their players this week because of the 5 State of Origin players they've got caught up into camp. Poor Roosters, Craig, lost so many stars, so much strike power, and they still only got 5 State of Origin players this year. Jeez, yeah. Tough times.
Yeah, I know it's easy to be suckered in by the media suggesting that the Roosters are playing above themselves and, they're battlers and get on board with them. But as you said, 5 Origin players, what can you say? And then a host of former Origin players as well. John, I'm looking at this Eels team. The thing that stands out for me is that's a very good bench.
Yeah. I mean,
that's a very, very good bench.
You were giving Will Lartu his dues last week for coming into the contest and making a difference, helping spark a couple of tries. But then you've got Widder McGregor, who by NRL experience level is a very good bench forward at this grade. And then
and was named the other week for NRL.
Yes.
And now he's named,
to the interchange
on the interchange.
And then you got Kane Karche, who is really enjoying a bumper year as a guy that was a depth option at the start of the season, but has worked his way into a really primary role here in the middle. And then Saxon Pryke, talented young back rower / middle forward since he's been deployed at the front row at times this year, who you can't really call it a breakout year when he's still a rookie, Craig, but I feel like he's made genuine progress this year and had a couple of really strong showings at this level.
Yeah. When I'm looking at this, John, I'm thinking there's a bunch of players that are still unavailable through injury, and the strength, I think, of this Eels team in New South Wales Cup to this point has been the forwards, and that's not discounting the work of the backs, because they've obviously been they've had to call on Ron Massey Cup players to fill in spots in the back line, but the constant really has been the work the platform that's been laid by the forwards. And I'm looking at the starting pack this week, and you've got first grade experience, even if it's minimal first grade experience, but Sam, Brendan, Tony, Charlie, Dan have all played first grade. And you've got, Sam, and we're talking about this season, 2 of those players. So that's a really good sign. And then in the back line this week, Arpa he's been someone that we've had to talk about because of the impression that he's made this year. He was the subject of a lot of conversation that was happening in chat on the live podcast last night. People asking about him after opinions. I've had countless people message me. What's his path to first grade? He's got NRL written all over him, those sorts of comments. So I think he's playing in his best position at fullback in this game. You've got the return of Bailey Simonsson, and you've got the halves who have probably been just as instrumental as the forwards in Ronald Volkman and Matty Hunter, previously the captain of the Jersey Flegg team, and obviously being missed to a great extent by the Jersey Flegg team. But this is the lot of a Jersey Flegg coach. You get the players in form,
isn't it? Unfortunately,
the players are in form. They're playing great football. You mentor them well. They get called up.
Get poached by New South Wales Cup and even the NRL at times.
Yes. Yeah. So, John, I'm very confident that the New South Wales Cup team will get the job done this week. Very, very confident about that. And it's as much to do with returning players as it is with the Roosters being down on troops a bit because of the first grade players being called up to Origin. So,
because they would have, I know that Casey Makatoa has been called up to the NRL this week, former Parramatta Eel there. They've called in Tom Robwell, so that's the brother of Toby there, who makes his debut on the wing. We've got at dummy half, they've got some guys called in there. And then you've got Feketi in the back row, Steep at lock forward, Max McAfee on the interchange, Taylor Lasalu, and Va'a's been playing in the NRL, so that's less of a call-up and more of just the extended depth being used earlier on in this season. So, yeah, the Roosters definitely missing some players this week. And even if they had those players, Craig, to pinch one of your phrases, on exposed form, you'd still be pretty confident about the Parramatta Eels. They hung with the Warriors for the majority of that game until they were the game taken away from them by the Warriors just being too good with the difference of personnel available in that particular contest. They then came back against Newcastle and they really put the sword to the Dragons, who were just behind the Warriors as one of the form teams of the competition. They are doing some terrific stuff right now. And that's not to say that they're going to walk all over the Roosters this week, because that's not how football works. They could still lose this game. But again, exposed form says that Parramatta are right up for this one. And if anything, they're in a better position this week than they were last week, because they've got the luxury of a couple of players coming back that are looking for NRL berths in Simonsson and Tuivaiti, who should make a big impression.
Yes. And it's an encouraging sign seeing those two players back, because let's face it, we need as many troops for first grade as we possibly can get. So, John, as I said, I'm tipping an Eels win in this one. And that now takes us to the Harvey Norman women's match, which is that against the Sharks as well?
Yes, both against the Sharkies.
Yes. Okay, so I'll let you run through the team there.
Yeah, part of a double header out at Sharks Park on Thursday night. This one kicks off at 5:30 p.m. Eels with a lot of Tarsha Gale talent in their squad. So it's a young and inexperienced squad by reserve grade standards. But so we have to sort of accept that there could be some stumbles and bumbles here and there. But it does bode well for the outlook long term, which is what we saw last year. And we've also seen some graduates from that squad into the NRLW this season. So I think it's a case of potential short-term pain for long-term gain. But we start at fullback with Dallas Graham-Wivell. Then you're on the wings, you've got Ella Carlisle and Tegan Long. So I'm not familiar with Ella and Tegan's 60s, but obviously Dallas coming from our Tarsha Gale pathways. Josie Lanaz in the centres alongside Kiana Takarangi. So a couple of siblings of former Parramatta Eels there. We talked about the connection to Nick Lanaz for Josie, and then obviously Brad Takarangi for Kiana. So great.
And I think Josie was running around for the Tigers last year.
That sounds right. I think you might be spot on about that one. I recall some of the team lists for the Tigers, just in the periphery of looking at Parramatta stuff. I think she was at the Tigers.
And was Kiana running around with one of the Queensland teams?
I think the Titans. I want to say the Titans, but I could be wrong about that one. But then in the halves, we have Matisse Bettridge and Aaliyah Sufan. Matisse, another new name that I'm not familiar with, but Aaliyah, we are quite familiar with, I suppose, probably the best way to put it, from the Tarsha Gale 60s, talented halfback there who doesn't mind running the ball, which is good. And then the front row, more Tarsha Gale talent with Tess McWilliams and Amani Lee Ava'e as the two bookends to Chelsea McKerra at dummy half. Tess McWilliams earning a dev upgrade earlier this year for the NRLW. So that's definitely a name to keep an eye on for first grade, but bearing in mind that dev contracts don't work the same way as they do in the NRL compared to the NRL. There are more restrictions on activating a development player in terms of injuries and suspensions, but Tess having a fantastic year. But we saw Chelsea last year dummy half 60s. Not a bad prospect there at the number 9 position. And Amani Lee Ava'e, another big, powerful front row there, one to make a little note of. Speaking of Tarsha Gale players, though, Alana O'Loughlin and Fontaine Tafua in the back row, two very rugged and powerful back rowers there. And in particular, Fontaine, who was another one of those players that the club mentioned as part of that trio of re-signings and upgrades for the NRLW. She is a year younger than her compatriots, I believe, and is a very talented edge back rower. Jessica Kennedy rounds out the squad at lock forward. Then on the interchange, it's all pathways players. Ashley Pottinger, the most senior of all the four of them here, but then she's on the bench alongside Kalia Gray, Taylor Falanico, and Liana Dimmick. Extend the roster, Paige Knapp and Ava Jones. So it's a lot of reasons to be excited about this squad 60s, but also acknowledging that there could be some struggles as they get used to the more intense pace of senior football. It is a jump up from under 19s through to full senior football here, and they're taking on the Sharks, who tend to be pretty consistent in these grades here too. Yeah,
without knowing too much about the Sharks, and I'm looking there, Monique Donovan's obviously a familiar face for us, and apart from that,
Kelly Signs.
Yes, Kelly Signs. I just noticed that there. but without knowing the age of those players, so therefore their level of maturity, it's hard to get a gauge on what this would mean. The Eels are obviously using the Harvey Norman women's team as, if a competition were to exist, it would almost be close to an under-21s team that the Eels would be fielding in this instance. So in that regard, they are making it a true pathways team with the number of familiar faces that are coming through the Eels junior ranks into a senior women's team. And given that this functions as the reserve grade for the NRLW, it shows you the direction that the Eels have decided to take with their team, and with obviously key acquisitions still happening for the NRLW team, where they are recruiting in the international and open market for key players. So, John, I can't really tip in this game, because I would have liked to have been operating with a team sheet with that trial last week, just to see whether the players that are named in this particular team spent time together on the field at any significant point in that trial against the Dogs the other week, because the Eels started off atrociously in that game. And then the team that was essentially up to the first lot of changes started to find a little bit of rhythm. More so, I thought, defensively than offensively. I don't think they ever found their rhythm in offense in that particular trial. But then it opened up a little bit in the final third. I think from memory they played in 20-minute thirds in that game, and I thought the final third sort of opened up a little bit. So without seeing whether there were combinations that did or didn't work within that team, it's a bit hard to make a judgment. We know of the players, but lining them up against a team which could be all mature age women, we don't know. We don't know how they're going to go. So for mine, I prefer a watch and see with this rather than leaping in with any prediction.
And that's where we were last year with the Harvey Norman's team, where especially last year was a lot more unfamiliar faces. Here we have the benefit of more Tarsha Gale talent, so we are familiar with the talents involved in this game to a better extent, but also how they handle the step up is subject to being seen. And I think you have a positive outlook here, because there are some precocious talents in this squad, but you have that knowing, like we saw with the Jersey, we're talking about Jersey Flegg, all the SG ball players stepping up in the Flegg. They've had some fantastic flashes, but also on the whole, it becomes that much more of a difficult competition to take a consistent approach to. So we have to wait and see here. Obviously hoping for the best, though. I think there's every reason to think that they can win, but also knowing that they could also be knocked over here against the Sharks.
Yes. And now, John, that brings us to the main event of the weekend, which is, of course, the NRLW clash tomorrow night tomorrow night being Thursday night, so depending when you're watching this, between the Eels and the Sharks. The Sharks, grand finalists from last season.
Crazy, isn't it? The run they went on, from how buried they were at one point in the year. But they got to the grand final and now had a real good whack at it too. And
you also think early in the season, a couple of moments in the game that we didn't quite grab, and we should have beaten the Sharks.
And
in our early season run
that was the difference between us being in a position to make a run at the grand final. When you look at the balance of other results, yes, technically the Eels could have won other games, but no game was more important as a swing between two teams in competition for the finals than that round 2 clash between the Eels and the Sharks, where the Eels went down 18-16. I figure Nessa Biddle scored late in the game there to take the lead. It was a humdinger, but also a heartbreaker. And you got to think that the Eels have this one circled on the back of that, and also the fact that it coincides with the season launch. Quickly going through the Sharks team 60s, kicking off at 7:45 p.m. here at Shark Park or Sharks Park. Obviously, it's the main event of the night, but Cronulla with some new faces, it looks like. At
it's funny you say that, John, because I'm sure a lot of supporters like ourselves are trying to become familiar with players across the NRLW in other teams. We obviously make it a point to be as familiar as we possibly can with all the Eels players, and given a lot of them come through pathways, and if they've been recruited from outside, we look to do our due diligence as commentators on the game to find out what we can about those players. But when you've got it across teams and the NRLW doesn't get as much media exposure as the NRL, looking at a team, the team list, as I am with this Sharks team list, and I'm going, some of those names, they're not familiar to me as Sharks players. So I'm not sure what their background is and their respective talents. So it is interesting that I was thinking maybe it's just me. Maybe I wasn't familiar as I should be.
There are definitely some familiar names in this team, but there's also plenty of new ones. And we start with a new name at fullback, Emma Veron. Then on the wings, Casey Staples and Georgia Ravix. Familiar with Georgia there. I think Casey did play last year, but I'm not sure Cassie. But of course, the big name there in the back line, Tiana Penatani-Gray, who I believe is their captain, former Parramatta Eel, former Rooster, now Shark. And Nessa Biddle, who I just mentioned as a crucial player in that contest last year, is in the centres. Yep. I think she played back row last year, if I'm not mistaken. But now in the centres. In the halves, you got Georgia Hanaway and Shante Kiriaratu. Now, that is a new halves pairing, I'm pretty certain. So, Cronulla making some bold moves there. Front row, another former Eel, very talented prop forward in Ellie Johnston. She's joined in the front row by Quincy Dodd, another talented player that we're familiar with, and Jacinta Carter. You got Talia Holmes. I wonder if that's a relation to Valentine. On the back row there with Rhiannon Byers, and then Brooke Anderson, another former Parramatta Eel here. Then on the bench, Nakir Davis-Welsh, who spent some time at Parramatta, Jadika Tafua, Manolita Takapautoa, not Toa. And then another former Eel and Philomena Hanisi, extended roster, Liki Leilua, Grace Lee Weeks, Dominique Dutoit, and Tamaya Kelly Signs. So, yeah, it looks like there's been a lot of roster movement for the Sharks this year, 60s. I don't know how many people they've got unavailable to the early season injuries. Eels have been bitten in that regard of a couple of their key forwards in Murphy and Kennedy, Mahali Murphy, Kennedy Charrington, unavailable in the opening rounds. So maybe the Sharks are also in a similar situation. But, yeah, they've done some serious roster pruning this year.
Yeah, it certainly looks that way, John. And I don't think there's any the other area where we maybe get caught out a little bit is if any of them get married and change their surname as well. And
not everyone goes Tiana's route where they do the it's not hyphenated, but it is the combination surname Penatani Gray, because she of course is in a relationship, or more than just a relationship, married to Aaron Gray, former NRL player. So, but yeah, when they do change their surnames, it can be hard to keep on top of it. Which I know.
I think with people, players like Tiana, the Penatani almost is a brand name, isn't it?
Yes.
So you'd think I think it's important for them as an identity, that certainly one that they're forged. People like her are forging in the media.
Prominent role in Fox Media, right? So
yes,
being,
so
like you said, part of the brand there,
and the chance to earn a little bit of coin, maybe in third-party deals and things like that. Having a familiar name is, I think, very important for them to retain their surname if they have a high profile as a player with a known name. So that's where we're at with that one. John, it's hard to make. I don't know.
I have no idea how to evaluate the Sharks. Yeah. They could be an absolute sleeper for the Premiership. They could be a bottom, 3 or 4 contender. I don't know. They are complete wild cards for mine, 60s, and it's uncomfortable going into round one, not really knowing where to evaluate or position your opposition. But that's where we are. Sorry. They've got some, like we said, players that stand out, Tiana, Anessa, Georgia Ravics, they are staple NRLW players. Ellie Johnston and Quincy Dodd in the front row, Brooke Anderson at lock forward. But there are so many question marks and unknowns about this Cronulla team. It is a little spooky.
Yeah, absolutely, John. It's what we do know, however, is that before they came into the NRLW, the Sharks were always strong in the women's game. They were one of the pioneering clubs.
Genuine
in women's
pipelines, for rugby league, for women's rugby league, yes.
And we have players that have played for the Eels that have a background at the Sharks. The Cherringtons had a background at the Sharks way back. I think
way back.
Prisoners.
Yeah. Yes.
So yeah, there's a lot that have been at the Sharks at different points in their career. But John, let's run through this Parramatta Eels team because it's an exciting group at the moment because you've got the players that there are a couple of significant outs at the moment, but there are also players that made an impression last year in the first year under Steve Georgallis that are returning. You'd have to think are going to be better for the hit out last year. Then you've got some players that have been bought and brought into the team that are exciting prospects. And then, of course, you have elevated players from the pathways who we can't wait to see how they perform at the senior level. And especially with the lock forward in this game who has literally, you could imagine, if you try to imagine similar, imagine someone who finishes the SG ball competition and their next game at a club level is in the NRL. That would be wild. That would absolutely be wild. Now, it's not to say it's happened in the past where players have made an NRL debut after playing in an SG ball season. It's rare, but it has happened. But when you think this is round one of the NRLW and they've gone, bang, we're selecting this Tarsha Gale graduate as a starting lock in this round one team. And I'll let you run through the team before we talk anymore.
Yeah, Steve Georgallis making a number of bold calls this week, 60s, in light of both the injuries to some key players, but also just being bold for the sake of going for all, I think, with a number of new faces across the squad, 5 of them in total. And we start at fullback with a familiar face, the emergent star from last year, Abbi Church, who captained this team against the Cronulla Sharks, joined in the back line by Zoe Fay, raising her 25th game in the NRLW 60. So that's a big milestone there. We've always talked about how you have to adjust the milestones in the NRLW. 25 is a big milestone there for Zoe, so well done. She's on one wing with Martha Mattielli, one of the new faces, on the other wing, coming to us from New Zealand Rugby Union. In the centres, it's a young pairing of Rory Owen and Lindsay Tui, but 2 very talented backs there. Expecting big things from there this year, 60s. In the halves, Cassie Hiku and Rachel Pearson reunite. The old experienced hand of Rachel Pearson and the precocious talent of Cassie Hiku. It's a fantastic combination, and hopefully they can go to even higher levels this year. In the front row, we've got Elsie Albert, Ruben Cherrington, and Brianna Eels. So 3 familiar names there from last year's campaign. Back row, it's your girl Chloe Jackson, little dynamo on the edges, with new recruit Paige Travis from England on the opposite edge. And we mentioned her in the prelude here, but Ryvvr-Lee Alo making her NRLW debut. I mean, so was Paige Travis as well, and so was obviously Martha Mattielli. But Ryvvr-Lee Alo making that jump from Tarsha Gale all the way through to the NRLW. Bang, bang. No reserve grade for her. Hopefully she has a monster game, but she's had an incredible year, 60s, and has earned this call-up. This hasn't been handed to her on the sake of any sort of nonsense. She has earned the call-up. And we go to the interchange now with Tanika Todd-Hunter, Rashay Farmasui, another new face there. Rashay did plenty of hard work last year in the Harvey Women's Premiership. They've been in a position here to vie for a berth on the bench, so well done to Rashay. Then Ruby Jean Kennard Ellis is the final forward on the interchange because the last spot's been taken by Fleur Jin. who is another new face coming to us from Queensland and rugby union as well. So a couple of union background recruits here, and Fleur was in part of that, or took part in that New South Wales and Queensland 19s game recently. Played at fullback and now finds herself being one of the utility options on the interchange. Extended roster features Mia Middleton, Tess McWilliams, Mahalia Murphy, who I believe has only been named by virtue of the Eels not having 22 fit players right now. But Yasmin Baker and Chelsea McKeer are also earning selection in the extended roster. Yeah, and of course with Kennedy Cherrington unavailable as well, she's joined by Mahalia Murphy as a couple of the big name forwards that aren't quite available at the moment. Yeah, you're spot on, mate. Mahalia Murphy heads a number of forwards, actually, that are sidelined for the Parramatta Eels. Obviously, Kennedy Cherrington, high profile among them, but don't sleep on the absences of Boss Kapua and Tyler Amiatu, two very talented starting or projected starting forwards for the Parramatta Eels when it comes to the edge and middle, respectively. So, a bit of damage to the pack to start the season 60s, which is never a good place to be, and especially given that it is an abbreviated season still with the NRLW. You want to be banking as many early wins as possible. But yeah, Eels come into this one a little bit undermanned, maybe a little bit gender insensitive, underwomaned, understaffed. There you go, gender neutral. There we go. A little bit understaffed this week, and we don't have an injury report right now. I believe that Kendi was due back in the opening rounds, was how it was phrased, after the injury in State of Origin 3, but not sure about Mahalia, not sure about Tyler, not sure about Boss Kapua. So we love a State of Origin injury, don't we? We do love a State of Origin injury, yes. It is. We love an injury in general, but State of Origin, for as few Eels as we generally have in representative football in recent eras, we sure do love getting them banged up. And unfortunately, Kennedy flying that flag this year. But yeah, even without those injuries, I suppose it speaks to the roster building that Steve Georgallis and his crew of recruitment and retention have done, that the Eels still look so sharp, 1-17. Yeah, so John, just based on what we saw of the Eels last year, we know this is a team that's on the rise, and it was a team that had to play for the majority, well, a significant part of last season without any issue, without both Kennedy and Ruben Cherrington. Yep. And without Boss Kapua. Yep. And there was another significant out for a period of time last year. Off the top of my head, it's Elsie Abbott missed some time last year as well. Maybe? Yes, she did. I think she did. But then when she came back, she had a good run. Oh, the other way we didn't mention too, Rosemary Beckett, who was a participant in the trials but not named in the 22, potentially an injury there too. Yes, that's possible. Or did Elsie miss any time last year? She was like a powerhouse last year. I'm just trying to think whether she did miss any time last year. The year before, she missed most of the season, right? The year before, it was most of the season. Calf injury. Yes. So, John, the Sharks, we've just said, we don't know enough about a number of their players. We know that they will probably be a strong team, but based on so many changes, there's a little bit of an unknown about them. There is, for us as Eels supporters and commentators on the Eels, there's a lot that we know about this Parramatta team, a lot that we like about this Parramatta team, even with significant players who are out. And the insights that I would be able to provide from that trial was that we had great form from players that we want great form from. So just to run through those that really took the eye in the trial, obviously Abbi Church, as busy as she always would be. Rory Owen was, I thought, quite strong out at centre. Martha Mattielli, early error, but then absolutely terrorised the defence with every carry that she made. Real physical presence out there. Cassie Toihiku didn't get a lot
of opportunities to shine from memory, but still was involved in one of the tries and made a break on another occasion. Rachel Pearson, I thought, I don't know what has happened in the pre-season with her kicking game, but I thought she took it to another level in that trial. I thought her kicks were just so on point. I can't remember a kick that looked like it was mishit or didn't go where she wanted it to. Now, what we've seen from Rachel in the past has been that she can really cause problems with her kicking game, but every so often there are kicks that seem to misfire. Her kicking game was on point all through that trial match. Elsie Albert, my goodness, the start of that game especially, she really made her presence felt. Even though the Bulldogs got off to a big score to start off with, every time she was involved, it looked like something was going to happen. Ruben Cherrington really looks like she's decided that she is the number one dummy half this season. And given the form of the dummy halves last year, that's a big statement for her to come out and be able to enforce, because I thought our dummy halves went particularly well last year. Chloe Jackson, one enormous break that she made in that trial, but I thought she looked great all the way through the trial. And I think that's probably about it in terms of the notes that I took from the trial. And given that it was quite, well, I won't say the lighting was dim. It wasn't what you'd call television standard lighting that was there. That would be my take from watching that game. So, John, in trying to take notes about players, I couldn't take notes about everyone. I was trying to, and also blogging the game. It's not great when you're blogging it is for you. May be a better person at doing it than me, John, but when I'm blogging, I can't multitask. I'm either blogging.
Full bandwidth on the blogging. Yeah.
Yeah. And that causes me to miss passages of the game where I'm typing. I'm doing the two-thumb typing on the phone, and I will miss often the first set after points because I'm describing a try.
Trying to catch up on the scoring play. Yeah, I feel that.
Or if there was a big break or something like that, and I'm trying to describe how it came about, some sort of big play or a big defensive play, I miss chunks of the game. I can't do what you can do, which is to watch and type at the same time. So there are limitations when I'm watching a game that I'm blogging. I don't pick up everything. And so those brief notes that I gave, I couldn't do justice to every player that was out there, unfortunately. So that's my take on the trial. There was a lot of rust that I saw in the Eels' performance. The Bulldogs obviously got the points, but that came from conversions rather than tries. I think from memory it was 4 tries apiece.
Correct. 4
converted tries to the Bulldogs, only 1 converted try in the Eels, 4 tries. Gave that scoreline of 24-18. It was a decent hit out, as I said, a bit of rust. But I've got to look at this and say, although the game's an away game, it's there in the Sharks' backyard. I know how important a good start to the season will be to Steve Georgallis and the girls. Steve is an excellent coach. We've had quite a bit to do with Steve and his insights on the game and his appearances on the podcast with us. He's a fantastic fella. He has a great rapport and understanding of his players. And you have to think that his second pre-season in charge with them and knowing a bit more about some of these players and the very selective recruitment that's happened this season, I'm really looking forward to this game, John, because I think I think the Eels can make a statement in this first game of the season.
Me too. I think that even with the 4 players unavailable in the forward pack, the Eels are still positioned to springboard into a win here in round 1. The biggest question will be are they going to be overawed for the occasion, having the season launch on their shoulders? They are the first cab off the rank for the NRLW this year. But I look at the players that are available, and I think that in the core positions across the spine, Church, Tuivaiti, Pearson, and Cherrington, they've got the number 1 options available, which is huge. They've got, I think that's a first choice backline pretty much too, right? Feo and Tuivaiti. So that's exciting. And I think that the players that have been drafted in to replace that experienced and talented quartet of absent forwards, there's every reason to think that they can get the job done. So, yeah, I think the Parramatta Eels have every chance, Craig, to kick off the fashion in the right manner against the Cronulla Sharks.
John, I'm hoping that the weather is better for tomorrow night.
Yeah, I've almost got sunshine poking through my window right now. Almost. It's just
it's the same here. How it is right down on the water there at Cronulla might be another question.
The actual coastal weather can always be either better or worse than where you are inland.
Now, it being at a smaller venue like Shark Park, hopefully the people turn up there to give a bit of atmosphere.
If they're not turning up for the season launch of the NRLW, then they're not turning up for the NRLW at all. So you'd hope they get up there.
And you'd like to think that it is the season opener, that there would be a bit of an emphasis on the locals to get there, create some atmosphere. And it's disappointing that it's an away game for the Eels to start the season. I think we start with about 4 away games?
Yeah, Camby was on the Matty John show and cracked the joke about being on the road for the first 4 or 5 weeks. Let me just check this. So at Sharks Park, it's Shark Park, man. It is Shark Park. I can't stand the S there for Sharks Park. I'm sorry. And then they're off to Auckland to go Media Stadium to take on the Warriors, who return to the NRLW this year. Then to GIO Stadium, the Canberra. And then round 4, they get the home game at Eric Tweedale, hosting the Newcastle Knights. So
and then after that is another away game.
Straight back on the road as part of it must be a double header or a triple header at McDonald Jones, because they're taking on the Dragons, who are not a Newcastle-based team. So it must be one of those. Is that their Magic Round?
It is.
Magic Round?
It's their Magic Round, yeah. And then after that?
Eels, unfortunately, forfeiting a home game this year to Magic Round. That's how it works, though, alternating year on year. Then they're back at Combank to take on the Cowboys, up to Brisbane to take on the Broncos, back at Combank to host the Roosters, up to the Titans at Seabar Super Stadium, and then they finish the season with consecutive home games against the Tigers and the Bulldogs at Combank. So, yeah, it is until the final rounds, or maybe the final month, you can argue, because there's 3 home games in 4 matches. They are on the road a lot, and when they are home, it quickly alternates. So no real chance to set up a home stand or rhythm at Combank until the top 8 may well be shaken out in the final 3 or 4 games. So
1 home game in the first 5.
Yes, correct.
Is a tough start to the season, but I think the girls get it done. I don't think they'll get overawed with this being the first game of the season, because the likelihood is it's not going to be a huge crowd, especially if the weather is still the same. I think that the Eels senior players that are there, Elsie Albert, Rachel Pearson, and now, of course, Abbi Church being an Origin player, they're going to really guide this team. And I think they'll get the job done. And I think, even though I don't know too much about the Sharks, I wouldn't be surprised if they get a comfortable win here. So here's the tips. It's time for our tips. I'm going to predict that this will be 26-8 scoreline to the Eels. First try scorer, I'm going to go with Chloe Jackson as first try scorer. Hits the edge, breaks through, goes all the way to score. And best on field for this, I'm going to have it as the main lady for the Eels team, Elsie Albert.
Nice. Yeah, I'm going to be bold and brash and go for a big Parramatta win, 38-12. start the season in explosive fashion. First try scorer, newcomer Parramatta Eels, getting the try down, I believe, the right
Good
edge.
call. Good call.
Best on field, I've said the biggest and the boldest for last, the rookie, Ryvvr-Lee Alo, having a monster game here. She's had an awesome year. She might not end up being the best on field, but I'm going to give her the backing for it because she's had an incredible year, and I think that she'll quickly show that she belongs at this grade.
Yep, great call. Okay, John, fantastic. We've got the first NRLW preview done. By the way, let's very quickly go into, what is it? Is it a top 5 this season or top 6?
For the NRLW, I believe it is a top 6. Sorry, final series 25. Will be. Okay, let me see if I can find the notes here.
Because I think what we might do is give our tips for the top 6 this year as a quick addition to this first round preview.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see if I can find. So that's the schedule. 12 teams or headers. It's a top 6. 3-week top 6 NRLW final series. There we go. So that's from the official NRL.com briefer as well. So no doubt about that.
Okay, so let's go with our tips for top 6. John, I'm going to go for the Broncos to be top 6. There's going to be no surprises, I don't think, here. Roosters top 6. Knights top 6, that's 3. Eels, that's 4. I'm going to go as a roughie because I think they've got the potential there, the Warriors, to be a top 6 side. And I think the Bulldogs. I'm going to go the Bulldogs. I think they've prepared for their first season as well. So a couple of newcomers there to be top 6. What about you, John?
Yeah, obviously Parramatta inside the top 6. I think the Roosters and Broncos are as safe a bet as you're going to get in this competition to be part of the top 6. So there's my first 3. I don't know about the Knights. They've been ravaged by injuries and players being poached. So maybe they're on the periphery of the top 6. Tough though. I think the Bulldogs showed a bit of spunk against Parramatta, obviously, in the trials, so that they'll be thereabouts. Yeah, then it gets. I'm just trying to think of like the player transfers because there was an active market, right, with the 2 expansions not a fair way of phrasing it for the Warriors, who are a returnee rather than an expansion club. Eels, Roosters, Broncos, book them. Bulldogs, my roughie. 2 spots left. I'm struggling here.
I didn't include the Sharks.
No.
But they're
grand finalists last year. But
yeah. And you don't like the Knights.
Yeah. I have no doubt the Warriors, so maybe let's say Canberra.
Yeah.
Canberra.
Yeah, I was close to tipping them.
Canberra, and it's got to be one of the ones I already talked about because I'm looking at the other squads, and maybe the Dragons. They've had a change of coach, right? Jamie Soward's out. Let's go for the Dragons then. Let's keep it interesting, shake things up a bit. So we've got 3. I would like to think solid bets in the Eels, the Roosters, and the Broncos, and then 3 more interesting picks there in the Dogs, the Raiders, and the Dragons.
Yeah. Okay, mate. Well, there we go. First preview out of the way. A little bit of a crystal ball into the top 6. Thank you for today, especially on this short notice, as what often happens with recording our preview podcast and trying to fit it in to our respective daily schedules. Thank you to everyone who's listening to this. And again, no matter what platform you're watching or listening to this on, if you can give it a like and subscribe, hit the notification as well if you're watching this on YouTube. And to our sponsors, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta, huge thanks. to the home of the Eels, Parramatta Leagues Club. Again, thank you to them. And don't forget our watch party on the 25th of July, the round 21 game against the Broncos in at Sterlo's. Free entry, free finger food, $5 beers. We kick off at 7 p.m, game at 8 p.m. on the big screen. Come and catch up with us, catch up with all of our regulars that are there, some of the other TCT contributors. We really look forward to seeing you then. And John, as always, say, go you mighty Eels.